Hi everyone, it's Miss Rossi. Today we're going to be creating texture monsters. What you'll be needing is a white piece of paper. You can use any white paper you have at home. We're also going to need a pencil and eraser. I have some markers here to trace with, and then I also have some crayons to add color, but you can use any material you would like to color in your picture. If you want to use markers, crayons, colored pencils, or anything else you might have. Today we're going to use our knowledge of texture to create a monster. So we know that texture is the way that something feels, and we use different kinds of words to describe how things feel, whether they are smooth, soft, bumpy, rough, scaly, gooey, slimy, sharp. All those different kinds of words describe texture, the way that something is feeling. Now in art, we can create texture a couple different ways. And one of the ways that we can show texture is by using repeating lines and shapes to make patterns and designs. So if we're just creating a drawing and we want it to look hairy, we can draw our lines a specific way to make it look like there is fur. If we want something to look scaly or bumpy, we can also repeat other kinds of lines to show that kind of texture too. So today we're going to create our own texture monster. So you can think in your head what kind of monster you would like to create and what you think your monster would feel like. So keep that in mind as we are drawing. But to get started, we're going to take our pencil and we're going to draw the body of our monster. Now on canvas, I do have a lot of different idea papers. I have different tops of heads that you can draw with different kinds of horns, ears, and other designs. If you want a slimy and gooey monster, I have some wiggly lines we can use. If you want spikes along your monster, we can do short little lines covering the entire thing, or you can make your monster fluffy and hairy with a zigzag line. I also have different kinds of eyes that we can draw, noses and mouths, and then of course I have different examples of textures that we can use to fill in our monster's body later on. So you might want to grab these papers off of the materials list on my Canvas page if you would like to see some different ideas to help guide your drawing. So I am going to decide how I want the top of my monster's head to look. I think I want my monster to be mostly smooth with a little bit of hair on top. So I'm going to start by drawing a big hill shape on the bottom of my paper, and now that is going to be our monster's body. Now if you want to use a wavy line to make a wavy looking monster, or a zigzag line to make a hairy looking monster, you're going to make this same shape except add your zigzag line instead as you're drawing it, or your wavy bumpy line like the tops of head pictures I have on canvas. Now I want my monster to have a little bit of hair on the top of his head, so I'm going to draw a zigzag line coming out from the top of his head, and then I can erase where that line meets the original line that I drew. And now it looks like he's got a little tuft of hair at the top. I want my monster to have some horns on the side of his head, so I can draw two triangles coming out from the sides. You can add whatever kind of design you want on the top of your monster's head. I want my horns to have ridges, so I'm going to draw some repeating curved lines going down the horns. Now again, drawing repeating lines helps create the idea of texture. So now that I added these lines, we know my horns aren't smooth and soft. They have some bumps on them. I think I'm also going to give my monster some antennas. So I'm going to draw a big curvy line that loops over itself on both sides, and I'm going to put a little ball at the end. I think that looks good for my monster's base. Now I'm going to think about what kind of face I want my monster to have. So I'm going to think about different kinds of eyes. You can look at the eyes paper that I have on canvas to get some other ideas too, or you can come up with your own. I want to give my monster some big goofy eyes. So I'm going to draw two big ovals. They don't have to be the same size. And I'm going to have one eye looking up and one eye looking down. I'm also going to give my monster some crazy eyebrows by just doing two curved lines. The next thing I'm going to draw is my monster's nose and mouth. Again, you can decide what kind of nose and mouth you would like for your monster. I'm going to give mine a nice triangle nose and a nice big smiling mouth with a tongue sticking out. I'm gonna make a nice silly monster. I think that looks pretty good. Now that we have have our monster drawn, you can start to think about what kind of texture your monster has. Is it covered in hair? Is it spiky? Is it slimy and drippy? And we're going to draw different kinds of patterns and lines to show our monster's texture. Now you can also pick a texture that doesn't really remind you of something real that we can feel if you just want a specific design or pattern on your monster. I think I'm going to do some curvy lines to create my texture to give my monster some bumps and lumps. So I am just repeating two kind of like C shapes over and over, all over my monster. Now I want to make sure I cover most of my monster and I don't leave too much white space to help create the texture. So whatever design you pick, you're going to want to fill up your entire monster with that design. Now we want to make sure we go around our face that we drew. We don't want to cover over our eyes and our mouth, so I am just bringing my little curvy design all around my monster without covering anything up. And you can see as I'm filling in my monster with my repeating lines, it no longer looks nice and smooth. It is starting to look rough and bumpy, maybe even furry. We just want to add lines and designs to make our monster look different than our normal plain white paper. There we go. Now that I filled in my entire monster's body with my texture design, I'm going to grab a black marker, and with my black marker, I am only going to trace over my monster. So I am only going to trace over my monster's body. So that first line we drew, I'm going to trace over my monster's horns, my monster's face, so its eyes, its nose, and its mouth, my monster's antenna, and that is it. I am not going to trace over my texture lines with my black marker. I'm going to trace over my texture lines with some different colored markers today. So I'm only tracing over these parts with my black marker, just so they will be easier to see once we start to add colors and trace over our texture. Now that I traced over all of the important facial features of my monster, I'm going to go in with some different colors to trace over my texture. So I have these lines on the horns that I drew to add texture. So I'm going to trace those, and then I have all of those cool little curvy lines I drew inside my monster's face that I can also trace over. I think I'm going to make them green. You can make yours whatever color you would like, but I'm just going to go in, trace over all of those little pencil lines so that they are easier to see and they are nice and bright and colorful, and then we can add even more color with our crayons. Once I finished tracing over all of my pencil lines with my marker, I went in with my eraser and I erased any of those pencil lines that I could still see. Now that I'm done tracing over my monster, I can grab my crayons and start to color it in. Now you can color in your monster with whatever colors you would like. When we're coloring in with our crayons, we want to make sure we fill in that space fully. We color it in as best as we can, and we try our best to stay inside the lines while filling in all of that white space. Now you can use your colors to create even more patterns and designs where our colors repeat over and over again. So right now I have blue, white, blue, white, blue, white. So you can do that if you would like to add even more designs on your texture monster, or you can color it in differently. It's up to you. We're going to color in our entire monster, and then once you're finished, you can pick a color to fill in your background. Again, coloring back and forth nice and slowly to fill in all the white space. We don't want to scribble. We took a lot of time to draw our texture monster carefully, so we want to make sure that it looks its best by working slowly and neatly. Now when it comes to my texture monster's body, I'm going to pick a color that is lighter than the color I used to trace my texture, just so I don't fully color over it. I want to still be able to see that nice, fun, exciting texture that I drew with my marker. So I'm just going to fill in the rest of the body, coloring nice and carefully over my design. Now, if you made your monster striped or scaly, maybe you want to color those stripes in different colors like I did with my horns. It's totally up to you what you want your texture monster to look like. We just want to make sure that we're coloring carefully, going around all of those other facial features that we drew. So I'm going around my nose, going around that tongue, and around the eyeballs as I'm filling in the rest of my monster. And then the last thing I'm going to do is pick a color for the background. That is my texture monster all finished. Once you're done with your monster, you can take a photo or video of it and upload it on my Canvas page. I can't wait to see the bright, colorful, and texture-filled monsters you guys have created. Try your best, have fun, and get creative, and I'll see you soon. Bye!